I'm delighted to be here today, and people talked about Brian Britton very fondly, but I can imagine Brian, wherever he is, seeing the number of people that showed up and the fact that we did it together, IWEA and now Ireland, and I think that's great. I don't think anyone listening to all the different presentations, and I have no intention of reviewing the different presentations, but anybody listening to them will have no doubt that the resource is there for offshore wind, the capacity is there to develop it, and there's almost a level that the question is, well, why in the name of God haven't we done it? You know, I mean, you look at other countries and they've done it, including the UK. That's a country we don't always look on fondly in terms of our past history, but they've done it. And their achievement, and listening to Alex, nobody could be in any doubt. They've done it and they've achieved on foot of it. So the issue is, why not? And I think in terms of moving forward, two things I would put. One, we need to establish more clearly the link with climate change. I mean, climate change is something, and Mike referred to when we didn't do, or the government didn't do carbon tax, there was a backlash. Why was there a backlash? Because there is this belief now that climate change needs to be tackled. And we need to get on that link as to why offshore wind makes sense, which it does, but it's just a question of focusing in on it. And the second thing I'd like to say is that I spent a significant chunk of my life as the head of the Taoiseach's department from 93 to 2000. And in that period, I was very much involved, and I had been before 93, in the IFSC. And I think we really need to understand the IFSC experience. In other words, Ireland had no background whatsoever in international financial services, really. And out of nowhere, we developed a centre which is now one of the strongest level 2. In other words, we're not going to be New York or a London or a Frankfurt, but we are a really strong, with significant benefits to the country in terms of jobs and tax and so on. And the reason we were able to do it is that we identified the government departments headed by the Taoiseach's department, but with finance and jobs as it was then, the IDA critically, and we brought the industry on board. And the approach we adopted was an action-based approach. In other words, we didn't kind of talk about what needed to be done. We just got down to what are the pieces. And in my view, I think we should all go forward from today, and I certainly will make it a significant part of my exercise as chair of Now Ireland, to convince my former colleagues and the people in the agencies that there are 3 essential elements to offshore wind. There's a lease, there's the grid, and there's the support system. And you have to have 3. One is of no particular value, really. In other words, unless you have the 3, you're wasting your time. And it is getting down to the practical, action-oriented approach and say, right, lease, what do we need to do? Do we need a piece of amending legislation to the Forsure Act? Probably yes, almost definitely yes. But it is getting down then to, and what in practical terms does that mean? In other words, you almost, and we did it in the IFSC context, we got down to the level of what does the amending legislation look like? So that's lease. Grid is really getting the regulator to stand up and be counted and say, right, we now need in the enduring connection, whether it's a particular block for offshore, which might be the simplest, or a recognition, and again, the practical, right, what are we going to do now? How are we going to make this happen? And just get down between the agencies and the industry to make it happen. And then the support system, okay, they've opened the door, but it is now again to getting down to the detail. It is, what do we need to do such that offshore wind can develop and that we can get this resource? And I mean, people have spoken about the impact. And again, listening to Alex, like, the thing that I think we don't really understand is how extensive in the, if you like, beyond London in UK terms, the impact of what they've done is. And we need to recognize, and I think particularly whatever Brexit brings, I think we need to recognize we need to do jobs, activity outside Dublin. And that's what offshore, if again we approach it the right way, because we don't want the jobs and the activity to be in the UK or Germany or wherever. Unless we approach it coherently, that's what will happen. But we need the activity and the jobs, and to convince the people in the west of Ireland and the coastal communities that this can pay off for them. So that's the mission. I think it is about people conveying the message actively to the politicians in particular, such that they understand this is there, this is something very practical to be done, and if we approach it at that practical level, we can make this happen for Ireland. So, thank you. Onwards to lunch.